governed by a lot of war hysteria that fueled prejudice and racism that really made people want to turn against Americans who happen to be of Japanese heritage. Americans that were born and raised here, like my parents. My dad's cousin was born and raised in Colorado, enlisted in the Army from there, and would be killed in action in Italy as well, on Hill 140. And so this story has been near and dear to my heart as long as I can remember. So I was really happy when we got this Gopher Broke stamp. Diane is the daughter of Fusa Takahashi, who was the lady who started the campaign to get this. And you might think, you go to your post office, you see a little stamp, you go, oh, that's a nice stamp. You might not know of all the stories that tried to, for the people that try to get those stamps. Sometimes the Postal Service just has ideas on their own, but sometimes the community actually can submit an application saying, you should do this stamp. We started in 2005 when her mom and her best buddy, Aiko Ogata King, who were both from Central California in the Valley, Central Valley, born and raised there, farm girls, and they were put into the camps in Amachi, Colorado. Her dad was one of the military intelligence service veterans that Elisa alluded to, that we now honor as Gopher Broke veterans. He served using his Japanese language and culture knowledge to defeat the Japanese. So if you can imagine that, like now, if the United States has enemies, we want to know about the enemy. We want to know to be able to protect ourselves and defeat the enemy. So we needed to know, when Pearl Harbor was bombed by Japan, we needed to know about Japan and the Japanese and their language. So her father was one of those soldiers that said, I'm going to use my knowledge of Japanese to help defeat the Japanese because I'm American. So in 2005, her mom and Aiko and another friend, Chiz Ohira of LA, they said, we got to get this stamp. Their third friend, Chiz, was a widow of Ted Ohira, who's from Hawaii, and he's one of the Gopher Broke veterans. And they knew the story. So they said, we got to get this stamp. We started sending letters and petitions. A lot of people signed. Some of you may have signed petitions over the years. The Postal Service said, sorry, we don't allow that kind of stamp. We can't honor individual groups or units in the military, sorry. In the meantime, what kind of stamp subjects did we see? We saw actors, we saw comic book characters, and that's okay, but we still felt, hey, you know, there's something wrong if you can't honor something as sacred as military service and those who fought and died overseas for our country. So we kept going anyway. I started in 2006 when those three ladies asked for some help. As a Sansei, as a third generation Japanese American, I said, yeah, I'm going to help however I can. So we just started going all out, going for broke for this. And it took 15 years. A lot of lawmakers, including Colonel Paul Cook, Colonel Cook, who represented this area a few years ago, he was one of the first Republicans to support our stamp. And after him, a lot of other Republicans started supporting the stamp. And pretty soon, the Postal Service got some pressure. And that, over the years, 15 years to be exact, is what made the difference. So this weekend, we're so elated that we could have a special postal program. You might go out and get a special postmark that says Manzanar Station only for this weekend. And you can have that as a take home to remember this story. So excited that I can work with Daryl today and share about our Go for Broke veterans and our elders. My aunt, Sue Cato, is right here. She was a Women's Army Corps volunteer. She was not in the camps because she was outside the military zone, but her relatives were in the camps, including my father and extended family. The center part, Stamp Our Story, that was our banner to help get people to support this stamp. And then next to Sue in the center there is Kazuo Takahashi. That's Diane's father. And then we have others who served as well, and Daryl is going to talk about. Before I break, I want to make sure if you have any questions before Daryl talks. You can also ask for Diane as well. You can also ask us afterward. We'll be in the lobby today, after this program, and tomorrow. And if you want to share or talk, feel free. We do have some free stickers we can give to you. And please go to our website, stampourstory.org. And we're on Facebook and Instagram too. So you can learn about and share the story with others, please. And please use the Go for Broke stamp. We want to sell this out. We want people to spread the story to their family and friends, because this is an important story that also unifies us as Americans. Something we really need nowadays, right? Stories like this. So, any questions for Diane or myself?
We'll also have questions afterwards, so if you think of something, we'll also do that at the end, but feel free to ask now as well.
Thank you. Without further ado. Thank you, Daryl.
I'm going to pass around this photo, and you guys can look at this up close. I'm going to be talking about this young man. His name is Ted Fujioka. This was taken on his last furlough when he visited Heart Mountain, Wyoming, which was one of the 10 incarceration camps. And we're not sure who took the photo, but we think it was done by the newspaper photographer for the Heart Mountain Sentinel newspaper. It's a fantastic photo. He looks older than 19 here. And I want you to take a good close look at this guy. And I'm going to try to introduce you to him through his words, because, well, obviously back in the 40s they didn't have cell phones, and we're all doing this now. And we know what people sound like. We see them on Facebook, we see TikTok and everything, and we can record them forever. But we don't know what he sounded like. All his brothers and sisters are gone. There are no recordings of him. We just have photos and his words. I'm going to start out today with a letter, or excerpt of a letter rather, to give you his basic character. This is a young guy who was 18 when Pearl Harbor occurred, and he lived in Hollywood, where, believe it or not, there was a little community of Japanese Americans, including a guy named Kono, who was Charlie Chaplin's chauffeur. And you can bet that a lot of these Japanese Americans then, who were gardeners to the stars when the stars lived in Hollywood. In fact, my mom and my uncles and aunts went to LeConte and Hollywood High, and they knew people like Alan Hale Jr., who was he? The skipper from Gilligan's Island, and Alfalfa with the hair sticking up, and various others like that. They actually lived in Hollywood. But Uncle Ted was a great letter writer, and it's too bad that he died at 19, because he probably would have become a well-known writer, perhaps a professor, maybe a lawyer. You know, there are about 300,000 Americans who were killed in World War II. And they say that there was a generation from England lost in the trenches of World War I, and that's certainly true of World War II. A lot of guys were wounded badly. Bob Dole, senator in Norway, and various others, and they lived on and had great public lives. Joe from down the street or Fred from Utah. We don't know their stories. They were just regular American boys. You guys want to come in? We got some seats down here.
They're becoming
Sorry.
junior rangers.
Come on in. Come on in. We lost one family, but we gained another. Have a seat. Have a seat. And welcome. And oh, by the way, how many are here at Manzanar for the very first time? Wow. How many have never heard of the 442? Wow, everybody has. You know, there was a lot going on in World War II that we don't talk about too much, like Japanese American soldiers, the most decorated unit for its size and length of service, the Tuskegee Airmen, the African Americans, who couldn't use the same restroom as the white officers, but they saved them when they flew and protected them from the Germans. They never lost a plane. The Navajo code talkers, who were kept secret until the modern era, and nobody knew what they did. Well, they helped win the war. This is Uncle Ted writing in 1944. Overnight, we won't notice a change, but it'll be there. At least we've tried. People write that we're fighting to preserve democracy, the American way of life. Well, as for me, I'm not fighting for the pre-war America, the America filled with prejudice, intolerance, greed. I'm fighting for a better America, striving always to improve this land to a real democracy. True, I don't believe we'll ever reach the goal of a perfect government, because there'll always be some rats, ignorant and greedy people, but at least we can improve. So he was a guy whose glass was half full, but when Pearl Harbor happened, he almost lost his faith in this country. So that's Uncle Ted, and he's the very first photo on the wall over there in uniform. He was 18 when Pearl Harbor occurred. He was just an LA City schoolboy at Hollywood High and a pretty good student. He was one of 10 kids who lived on Gordon Street, just below Sunset. And the old family house at 1400 Gordon will figure in this show. The family was big. Now that is Grandpa Fujioka, who was an editor of the Rafu Shimpo, a Japanese American newspaper in Los Angeles. And that is Grandma Fujioka, who, believe it or not, was a college graduate. Way back then, that was unusual. And you ladies might recognize that sort of haircut and my Aunt Peggy's haircut. Looks 1920s, doesn't it? Well, that's my mom right there. And the youngest son till the last one came along was Uncle Ted. He lived in Hollywood. And Hollywood, believe it or not, started as a Methodist community. And you could not drink liquor in Hollywood. And land was open and free and cheap in Los Angeles. In fact, beachfront property was about $10 an acre. I'll repeat that. You can't even buy a handful of dirt for $10 in Los Angeles anymore. And oh look, there's no Hollywood sign up there. It did go up till 1923. And in Little Tokyo, there was another family. My dad's family. That's my dad, Jack. And Grandma Kunitomi was actually a single mom raising these wild Little Tokyo kids. And I just wanted to throw that in to show you where my lineage came from. But on Pearl Harbor Day, the world crashed in. My dad was going to see a football game with his buddies at Gilmore Stadium near Farmers Market. And they had ridden an open bed truck to get there. And as they were watching in, they hear this announcement. Attention, Pearl Harbor has been bombed. All real report back to the. And my dad and his friends went. And they went back to Little Tokyo. And my dad said it was in chaos. chaos. The world came crashing down on our heads. And within 3 months, we were rousted and had to leave. And it was even worse for the Terminal Island folks who were here at Manzanar. Dad always said they were the most angry because they were rousted within 48 hours. My dad and his buddies rode a truck down to San Pedro from Little Tokyo. There was no 110 freeway, and they helped those people pack up and get out of there. So, the only modern precedent, the only modern comparison rather, could be if you were Muslim after 9/11, when there were attacks on Muslims, on people who looked different, Sikhs, people who were darker skinned, people who looked like an other, and your citizenship status in that kind of a time would go out the window. And that's a terrible thing, because in my way of judging the world, our Constitution should stand strongest when things are at their worst. I think we can all agree on that. So how did this little scamp turn into a soldier and eventually wind up buried in France? You might notice California is not on his headstone. His last place of residence, Park Mountain, Wyoming. And that photo that you see leaning against his headstone is that same one that you're passing around. Each one of his brothers and sisters had that photo on their wall. And I remember as a boy seeing my grandma and her friend with that photo, and a mochi, which is the rice cake, and a tangerine, and they were chanting Buddhist chants and burning incense. And we young Sansei boys, me and my cousins, who were running around like wild men, would look at them and, wow, what is that? And we run off. Later on you realize, oh, that was her son. And they were praying over his memory. It was kind of like there was a guy at a liquor store across the street from us, and this is kind of a lesson for people who don't remember that era. And this gentleman was a mean guy. He was not friendly to anybody. And he would take your money and wouldn't say anything to you. And I remember seeing numbers tattooed on his forearm. Only later do I realize what he has survived. This is where the 442 fought, and I'll be talking a little bit about when our family went there to see where he fought and to visit his grave. This is in eastern France. It's near the German border. So, Roosevelt's order takes effect. The army starts rounding us up. And the camps are being built, like this one here at Manzanar. So you got to hold all these people. Where do you put them? Fairgrounds? The Santa Anita racetrack. There's a good place. Lots of room. Grandstands. Big parking lot, which by the way was dirt at the time. Big infield. And so they built all these stories about Santa Anita, where some kid was running around saying, "We're staying in Seabiscuit stall." For you young kids, Seabiscuit was a famous horse. But Ted had to hold it together because he was losing his faith in America. And I don't blame him. If I was treated that way, I might be really mad at myself. He wrote to Mr. Lloyd, James Lloyd. This is an incredible story. His history teacher back at Hollywood High. Mr. Lloyd letters buoyed Ted, and he was happy to receive his yearbook through the mail. And then the family went up to Heart Mountain, their permanent camp. The shades were drawn on the 4-day train ride. Now, James Lloyd passed away. And one day at work, I was looking through my email, and I get this random email saying, "Hello, my name is Kathy Lloyd. You don't know me, but I found your name on the internet because you've done monologues about your Uncle Ted." Well, my dad, James Lloyd, was your uncle's teacher. And he passed away, and I was going through his things, and I found letters. And I'm going to read this entire one because It totally sets the scene and what the people went through, 120,000 people went through following Pearl Harbor. It's highly descriptive, stated June 5th, 1942. Dear Mr. Lloyd, please forgive me for not writing sooner. My only excuse is that I've been rather busy getting settled here at Santa Anita. It takes about 1 month to become thoroughly accustomed to this entirely new life. I'll try to explain to you all the important points and events which have taken place since I left Hollywood High. On the morning of April 29th, we, my family, got up at about 4 a.m. As you would expect, everything at home was a mess. Having straightened out all the minor details, we went to the assembly center at Lexington and La Brea. We then boarded buses, and after an uneventful trip of about 2 hours, we arrived here. At the gates, an armored car, armed with about 3 machine guns, greeted us. I suppose they were placed there for the psychological effect they would have on the new residents. We were registered, given our mess hall buttons, and were taken to our home, a horse stable. Since there are 7 in our family at the present time, we were given 2 stables. Can you imagine? 2 dingy stables greeted us. My mothers and sisters just sat down and cried. It was such a difficult home, different home to the one we have in Hollywood. After a few days, however, we became more used to it. Our beds were army cots, not to be confused with the canvas type. Army mattresses, not straw-filled, thank goodness. And army blankets, 1 per person. A broom, a water pail, and some other things were also given to us. And after about 2 weeks, we got the place looking home-like. We put up curtains, covered the walls, put in a garden, built shelves and tables, and put up pictures. And luckily, we brought along folding chairs, card tables, folding screen, and rugs. The floors are made of asphalt, not very sanitary or appealing to the eye. However, we partially covered them with the rugs we had brought. Enough said about our new house, about the food situation. For 2 weeks, we had terrible food. Beans, stew, hash, macaroni, and spaghetti made up the meals. It made no difference whether one was 70 or 7 months old. All had to eat the same food. It made me so mad and disgusted to see the young boys and girls, 3 years old, trying to eat beans. You have to understand, we eat rice. I could write forever about the food, but time as well as stationary doesn't permit. But the mess halls and all the other facilities are operated on a community basis. The showers, 200 for 18,000 people, are about a half mile away, and by the time one gets back and takes a shower, you're ready for a new one. The dirty water from the wash basins and showers flows into a small stream, uncovered, which flows through the camp. It stinks. 2 weeks ago, they started a senior high school. It's about 1,500 students. There are no supplies. The teachers are older than us, and attendance is not required. I am taking chemistry, physics, English, literature, bookkeeping, chemistry, physics. Gosh, Mr. Lloyd, I really miss good old Hollywood High. I guess you can't appreciate school until you can't go. Maybe when this mess is cleared up, I'll be able to come back again. I've got my fingers crossed. Oh, by the way, will you please tell Mr. Schaefer of my new address here at the racetrack, and have him send my school papers and annual. Thank you. So they arrived up in Heart Mountain, Wyoming to find tar paper barracks and the coldest winter in years. Now these are all LA people, or a lot were LA people, and they didn't have winter clothes, so the famous Sears and Montgomery Ward's catalogs were very important. And yeah, there's always a discussion these days about, what do you call these camps? Concentration camps, relocation camps, incarceration centers. I prefer incarceration centers myself, mainly because my Jewish friends really don't like me saying concentration camp. And I've always lost a couple of friends in that discussion. The locals up there were hostile. This is rural Wyoming. And I go up there every year for the Heart Mountain Foundation pilgrimage. And I'm a member of the board. And I love Wyoming. But you remember that it is the cowboy state, and still is. And for Ted and most of those there, that was their first time out of California. You know, I was just up in Idaho and Montana fishing, and the airports are crowded, and people were going crazy. And Americans travel like nuts, as we won't see it on the nightly news. Back then, that wasn't true. If you went, say, from downtown LA out to Covina, to Orange County, to Gardena, you were going way far away. Back in the 1970s, when my brother Dale, who was born in Heart Mountain, conceived here, that's our theory because of, you know, the time, counting backwards from his birthday. Well, I'm kidding. So that's Heart Mountain. And my brother Dale, I just mentioned, is a geologist. And he will tell you, this is one of the most unusual mountains on Earth. Does anybody know why? It's upside down. That mountain was not there. It rolled into place. Look it up on Google. Heart Mountain Formation has older rocks on top of younger rocks. And the latest theory is that it came from many miles away at 100 miles an hour. And now it sits there as a major mountain in northwest Wyoming. Anybody know what those black piles are? Coal! They would bring in dump trucks of coal, dump it there, and you would run out with a pail and grab coal and burn it in a stove to keep your barrack warm. If you go up to Tule Lake, not Tule Lake, Topaz, I've been to about 5 camps. Topaz is way out in the middle of the Utah desert. And as you're walking around the camp, you'll see bottles and cans and nails and what are these black piles? Oh, it's coal left from the camp. It's still there in piles. Ted was down after leaving Santa Anita. Somehow he began to get it together. And one of the things he did was he organized a high Y club. This is kind of like a boys club. And so he wrote to Mr. Lloyd and said, hey, send me the bylaws for a high Y club. And send them up to me because I want to get it going up here. Because he wanted the guys, he wanted the girls, he wanted people to have something to do, to have some kind of hope, something to look forward to, besides being incarcerated. And this is one of the things he wrote. Now keep in mind, he's only 18, so his writing is a little wacky here. We of the Heart Mountain High School have an unusual problem, one which must be solved. If we ever hope to have an institution with high school spirit, we cannot let the development, which thus far has progressed admirably, of our school become static because of this minority of unintelligent people who continue to influence the real students. It's time for action, not mere words. Let's face the problem with resolute hearts and smiles, and we'll be sure to come out successfully. It sounds like a teenage boy talking about that. Well, he was. This is from his notebook. Just like today, somebody would write down their favorite group or singer and their favorite songs. He began to become a student leader. And one of the most remarkable things happened when he took it on himself with his club members and led a drive to have an American flag erected in Canada. What a crazy, ironic thing to do. Hey, Mr. Principal, we want to fly a flag. Hey, Mr. Administrator, we want to fly the American flag behind barbed wire. That's Ted there. And you will notice the Bellamy salute. And the Bellamy salute, who knows about the Bellamy salute? Okay, it was not always this when you pledge allegiance. It used to be this, the Bellamy salute. And that's what you see those young ladies and the others doing, the Bellamy salute. And obviously, because of Hitler and Nazi Germany, they changed it to this. Ding. Yeah. So if you ever see an old photo before 1941, he graduated at age 18. His buddy Al Joe was Ted's campaign manager, and Ted ran for student body president. One day, Al got roughed up by the opposing candidate. Ted would win in a landslide, and his opponent gained fame after the war as the Rakushippo columnist Forrest Yoshinaga. Yep. That's how it was. I don't think I'm defaming him. That was what George was like. George Yoshinaga. In June of '43, Ted took a walk with his buddy Al. He sat on a rise overlooking the Hart Mountain Relocation Center and looked at the camp. And Ted seemed pensive and serious. He was kind of quiet. And Al noticed this. He just kind of sat there and watched him and waited for Ted to speak. And he said, joining the Army. This is by the way, these are all copies of the original documents, which are held by my cousin Marge. And this is his official selective service letter, dated July 15, 1943. Dear Mr. Teruo, T-E-R-U-O, that's why his name is Ted, Fujioka. Dear Sir, receipt of your application for voluntary induction is hereby acknowledged. Preliminary physical examination has been waived, and if you are found acceptable by the armed forces, you will be immediately reclassified from 4C enemy alien to 1A, and ordered to report for induction. Sincerely yours, Alta Christensen, Park County Board. Fort Warren, Cheyenne, Tuesday night, August 24th. Dear Mom and Pop and everyone, it's Private Ted Fujioka for the duration. Yep, to my utter amazement, the Army doctors found my chest. Now, I have to explain that Ted was not a great athlete. He was on the slender side. He was about 5'9" to 5'10", unusually tall for a Nisei boy. And on the thinner side of things. He was maybe more of a lover than a fighter. But the Army and the exercise and the physical training was good for him. And eventually, I believe he put on about 15 pounds of muscle. So when he came back on furlough, that photo that you guys have been passing around, he looks filled out in that uniform. They found nothing wrong with me, not a single solitary thing. I'm what is known as a perfect physical specimen. Now, my Uncle Dick, his older brother, tried to enlist, but he had an ear problem, and he was rejected. You can be rejected for all kinds of things. And in the great irony of military service, the people in the best shape are the ones who go. I'm leaving tomorrow with one other recruit, and the 41 of us will be going along with the train. Approximately half of the 43 here pass their physicals, and most of them are 18 years of age. I learned a great deal from them. They're regular fellows, all of them. The whole business is really an experience. I think I've learned more in 2 days about people and their emotions than I have in years. America is something big. I know now that the swell fellows I've met are going to be good soldiers, and even the officers have hearts. One Navy officer treated me exceptionally well, took a liking to me for some reason. I've always wondered about that officer. This is an insert, kind of a leap into the future. That's my sister Carrie there. My brother Dale with the laptop. And that was the hill where the city where he died. Back in the 40s, LA was still a small town. I was still traveling across country to Camp Shelby, Mississippi was an amazing experience. Ted was a very descriptive writer, and you could tell by his writing that he looked at things and he noticed things and he observed and he retained them and then could put them into words. Across the historic wide Mississippi River, an unforgettable scene. Saw the Deep South, which is with its Jim Crowism, cotton fields, poor Negro tenement farmers, and Southern belles with their funny accents. On the whole, the South is poor. Crops seem to beg the soil for needed nourishment, but the soil can't respond due to centuries of continual cotton crops. Worked to death. And the colored folks live in poverty. Shacks are without protection, paint. Believe it or not, I saw colored people eating huge slices of watermelon just like in the movies. The Mississippi countryside, though, is beautiful. Seemingly impenetrable forests of green, trees and vines are all over. And I saw the South, sore spot of this nation. It's again amazing to us who travel all the way. How many have come from far away to NASCAR? Most of us, right? And we think nothing of jumping in the car. Oh, it'll take us 4 hours to get there. Just punch it in. Turn left here. No, turn right here. Back then, you just didn't travel like the Rockefellers or the Vanderbilts or the other people. That's the unit path to the 442. It started as a sword being held by a yellow arm. Thank God they got rid of that one and went with the Torch of Liberty held high. It's red, white, and blue. You know, by the way, that's the 57mm anti-tank gun that Ted was trained on. It was in anti-tank. And these were the guys who were tasked with hitting German armor. If you know anything about World War II, the Germans had incredible equipment, incredible tanks, incredible planes. They had developed jets and rockets. They were working on an atom bomb. But the American weaponry and the rest of the world's weaponry had to catch up to the German stuff. And that 57mm gun, which has a bore of about that big and throws about a 6-pound shell, could not penetrate a lot of the German armor. And so when they came up against the Tiger tank, perhaps, a Panther, or the legendary King Tiger tank, their shells oftentimes would just bounce off. But that's what we had. And that's what we had to go into battle with. So Camp Shelby is where the 442 trained, and vets I've talked to describe it as being rough. Basic training was in hot, humid heat, putting on 100 pounds of gear and then marching for miles through the heat. And if you fell out, there was no, oh, let's rehydrate him with Gatorade. It was take some water, eat this salt tablet, and let's go. It's amazing to me how things have changed. We worry about concussions, even in cheerleading. Back in those days, spit on it, put a Band-Aid on it, and let's go. And if you couldn't hang with that, you couldn't make it. I'm gonna, here, this is a cool one from 1943. Basically what he's saying here in this letter is, I fully realize what I'm in for. I have faith in this country. Despite evacuation, race prejudice, there's so many intelligent, tolerant Americans, like those government officials, Papa, who gained your release. That act alone could have influenced me into volunteering. I owe this country much, and so do all the other Nisei, whether they realize it or not. We gotta fight for our rights in the right way. Not by not cooperating with the government through the WRA, not by walking around with chips on our shoulders, not by sitting contentedly in relocation centers when it's at all possible to relocate, get out, do something for our country and our people. The Nisei, the Issei, our parents, who expect to live in this country, and our children, the Sansei. That's a remarkable thing to see. I've never seen a soldier's letter where he mentions the next generation, the Sansei. There were very few in that era who were born in camp who were Sansei. My older brother Dale is one. He was born in '43. There are a few others I know of, but the bulk of the Sansei are baby boomers like myself, born in the late '40s, mostly born in the '50s, and a few born in the early to mid '60s. So we're very classically baby boom, Disney, Davy Crockett kids. So this is the partial family up at Heart Mountain. Now I show this picture to show, well, there's my dad, there's my mom, there's grandma, there's grandpa, and grandma is tucking in Ted's pants. Tucking his shirt into his pants. And he's got this kind of like a whole look on his face. And his younger brother Babe is laughing at him like, haha, you dude. And he went from that to being soldier. So he was just a guy. He was just a regular kind of guy. Grandpa had been held by the FBI, and he was taken the afternoon of Pearl Harbor. And he was rousted off the steps of the Hollywood House. And he could not take a change of clothes, his spare glasses, his medication, his health was not good. He almost died in FBI custody. And in Farewell to Manslaughter, there's a scene where Yuki Shimoda comes back to the family, and she's walking like an old guy, and that's what they saw when Grandpa Fujioka was released. He never worked after the war. His health was ruined. Ted had a girlfriend. A lot of young soldiers. He looks very different. I gotta go back here from that guy to him. His posture improved, his musculature improved, and Jan was his girl. And Jan, Ted, and Al Saijo were kind of a triumvirate of the great kids. They were the ones who were the leaders, and they were the smart ones, and they were the ones who, after the war, were going to go on to great lives. Well, after the war, the other two, Al and Jan, went in different directions. We'll talk a little bit about that. War is not good. War is hard. These are two British officers. They were moving from a burned out tank, the remains of a German. War is not anything but killing people, as we're seeing in the Ukraine right now. It's just horrible. Ted never wrote about it. He never put in any letter any of the horrors and deaths around him. His buddy saw him riding off and using a stubby pencil that was later returned to the family. He wrote to his parents, his brothers and sisters, to Mr. Lloyd, and to his girl Jan. We have many of these letters. I have about 50. Unfortunately, some have been lost to the years. You guys might know David Ono from Channel 7. He was a good friend of our community. About half a year ago, I ran into him and he said, you know, hey, I got some letters from your uncle. And I said, get out of here. So I'm going to get together with David and see what he's got. But I do know that the letters he sent to his sister, Ted's sister, Ayako, who was nicknamed AY because the Caucasian teachers could not pronounce Ayako, so she was anti-AY forever. Her letters were thrown away by her husband because he just wanted to clean things. So there are many that are lost. And there's a pause in his writing from late October to early November of '44 because the 442 was fighting like heck in the Vosges of eastern France. This is very near the German border, and that's why it was so critical. And in the town of Briere, all these roads and railroads converge. It was a strategic farming village point, and that's where terrible fighting happened, and that's where they made their legend. Rescued the lost battalion, liberated the towns, and they lost a lot of people. This is a side street to the town of Briere. Remember this shot, guys, because it's coming back. That's an American tank. Those are American troops. They went house to house to clear out the Germans, and it took severe fighting. Right on the other side of the door, like you saw in Saving Private Ryan, there's somebody on the other side of the wall, and some of the vets told me about popping a wall open with a grenade, and then you throw in another grenade, and you just jump in there and start shooting and hoping for the best. It was just wild combat. This is near the town of La Husserie. Husserie, I can't pronounce it the way the French people do. And the towns and the small hills around there are very reminiscent of the Silver Lake area of Los Angeles, near where I live. If you know any towns where there are low rolling hills, this is what they look like. They are not as high as the Griffith Park Hills or the Hollywood Hills. They are lower than that. But the Germans had had many years to fortify them, and they also zeroed in every square inch of these hills so they could say, okay, coordinate this, boom, and they would shoot a mortar and it would land exactly where they aimed it, just as they did for Omaha Beach. That sector of beach is Sector 12. Boom! Sector 12 is hit. And so the 442 guys had to fight upwards through thick forests, and boy, those forests are thick. They're so thick, you could reach out and touch trees like this. It gets so dark in there, even at midday. That's why the Black Forest is called the Black Forest. This is below the Black Forest, and below where the Battle of the Bulge occurred. So if you're looking at France, Germany's over here, Belgium is up here, and 442 was fighting right about here. And they had come up through Italy, and Uncle Ted landed as they crash landed. So the 442 anti-tank guys landed by glider, they hooked up with the main body, and they headed toward history. I'm sorry, 10/15/44. I gotta read this about how proud he was. At Shelby, he had participated in his first 442 review or parade. The Stars and Stripes stood out against the white sand, the blue sky, the green, and row upon khaki-clad soldiers so neat in the sun. It's funny how a choking feeling of pride swells up inside of you as you watch all the young soldiers marching past the reviewing stand in perfect order, keeping in step to the music of our band. As our group passed the stands, we turned our heads to the right. I couldn't help but smile with pride for our regiment, the 442, a crack outfit. You couldn't find better soldiers at any place. You know, Peg, that's his sister, I consider myself the luckiest fellow in the whole world. I have everything to fight for. I have the finest parents a fellow could hope for. Brothers and sisters who are swell. the nicest girlfriend waiting for me. Gives a fellow courage, faith, and hope. And yes, a fellow who volunteers for a combat team isn't supposed to even think of coming back. And I can't help but wish that I will be able to return all I have and all I love after the war. Well, he wouldn't make it. He was, and Andy Tang and those guys became regular soldiers when there were no tanks to fight. In the forest like that, German tanks were not operating. So the anti-tank guys were burying litters, carrying wounded, they were clearing mines, they were guarding roads and bridges. They became regular soldiers. So Ted was burying a litter, carrying a wounded comrade, when a tree burst on him. You see this in Band of Brothers. When shells come in and hit a tree, there is no hiding because the explosion and the shrapnel come straight down. There's virtually no hiding from it. Our family got word from somebody, and I've got to look up who told us this, but Ted lived for a while after being terribly wounded. And I sure wish to find out how long he survived, but he was badly hurt. And I'll show you something that will give you a clue as to how dangerous and badly wounded he could be. So the family moved back to California, and Grandpa again was pretty much retired, and Grandma tended to her garden, which was an amazing garden. This is at 1400 Gordon, which is in the heart of Old Hollywood. And right behind that property is where Judge John Iso's family lived. And you will see Judge John Iso Street in Little Tokyo today. That's a 1400 house. And this was taken by Kathy Lloyd, Mr. Lloyd's mother, because she wanted to see where Fujioka family came from. They all had baby boom families, my uncles and aunts. That's my mom there. The youngest brother, Babe, was laughing at Ted when he was getting his shirt tucked in. Uncle Pete and his wife Doris moved to Detroit and was one of the leading JA Japanese American families of Detroit and helped found the Detroit JACL. Auntie Peggy took care of her parents and was the family historian for many years and saved these letters, by the way. Auntie Setsu moved to Detroit and worked for the YMCA and never married, but she kept a list of everything she ate and every restaurant she went to and saved every receipt for everything she ever bought. Auntie AY was kind of the family beauty. Auntie Mia had 5 boys and was a staunch Republican in Pasadena. Uncle Dick there, who tried to join the army but had a bad ear, was a produce man, a great guy, loved him so much. And so this old family, one of the early families of Hollywood, is the basis of the lineage that is mine. And years later, the cousins went to the old house and took that picture to imitate this old 20s picture. And that board, well, I have to tell the story. I was driving through Hollywood and I took Gordon Street just to see the old place. I turned the corner and I hit the brakes and gasped. It was gone. It was torn down. And the 2 houses on the side. And so I went over to the dumpster and grabbed a board from the old 1400 house. And a month later, there was a boxy, junky condo. So the old Hollywood house is history now. But what's happened to the community? Well, it's not the 40s anymore. Anti-miscegenation laws are gone. You can love who you want. You can marry who you want. This is my nephew, Ben, and his beautiful bride, Vanessa. This wouldn't have happened back in 1941. And my cousin Marge is a judge up in the East Bay. And she's done very well. And from the old days of the Japanese Americans being fishermen, gardeners, and farmers, with just a few doctors and lawyers, he's now moved into the white-collar profession and well represented. And that's Kathy Lloyd, who emailed me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I have letters my dad wrote to, I think, your uncle." And she's become a family friend, and we see her whenever she comes down from San Jose. We took a trip to the battlefields. This is a Frenchman, Michael, who is a reenactor. And when I met him, he looked at me and he said, "You know the history?" I said, "Yeah, I take care of the family history." And he said, "I know where your uncle was killed." I said, "What?" And he took us to the place. This is Lost Battalion Hill. This is where the 141st of the Texas 36th was trapped by the Germans, and the 442 went in at great cost and rescued them. You can still see foxholes in the forest there. And I met on Facebook the son of Lieutenant Marty Higgins. Marty Higgins was the leader of that Lost Battalion. And I said, "Hey man, I went to the forest and we found at the top of the hill these 3 bigger foxholes, and they're probably the command foxholes. This is probably where your dad was." And he was very happy to hear that. It was amazing seeing this forest and seeing where the guys come. And that's what I found it there. This is a piece of shrapnel. Mikhail thinks it's part of a German rocket called the Screaming Mimi. I'm not sure. Imagine that coming down, flying from the top of an explosion in a tree at supersonic speed and hitting you. On a lighter side, they were poking around in the brush and they found this. This is an actual relic of World War II from the U.S. Army. Many, many decades later. The French people are very appreciative of what the 442 did. That's A.Y.'s daughter. That's my sister. That's Dick's wife. Pete's daughter. Dick's son, our French guide Serge, and Mikhail. And that's at the cemetery in Epinal, not too far from where the 4425. 5,000 Americans. "19 of us went on this trip. We had to. So, what's that that little street in the town of Briere? That's what it looked like when the 442 secured the town and cleared it. This is what it looks like today. Look at that fountain. I got on top of the stairs of the old church. And I looked at the photo from then and tried to compose a shot to capture the moment. The place looks just the way it used to look. It's too bad Ted couldn't be one of these great old guys. It's really too bad when most of our Nisei vets have passed on to their reward. They seem to be around forever, but in the last few years, they've dropped off and disappeared. Very few are left. If you ever see one, say, "Hey, I know what you guys did." So, we don't have film of him, we don't have video, we don't have any tape recordings. We have a few photos, we have his words. Yeah, what he did. And that's how we know him today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daryl. I wanted to give Celeste an opportunity to talk a bit about her Uncle Joseph Pato, who actually survived the war and received a Medal of Honor, which is a huge honor.
This is kind of on the spur of the moment, so I don't have a lot of things prepared. But first of all, my mom and her family were interned here in Nazareth. And they spent from June of '42 to approximately August of '45 here, and some later. My mom was in high school. She was taken from Santa Monica High. Lived in Santa Monica and brought here. Santa Monica being a beach city, and brought here was very different. And she talked about getting here and how the barracks had holes in them, and they would take the top of the cans and cover the holes so that the cold would come through. And when they got here, they didn't have army issue. They had to make their own mattresses with straw, and that's what they got. And then the barracks had boards on boards in the ceiling, and as many boards was as many people got into that barrack, whether it was family or not. They just put everybody together. And my mom and my aunt, they worked here, making the camouflage nets for the Santa Monica Airport. And I have 3 cousins that were born here. Well, what's funny is I brought my aunt here, and we have the maternity ward. You see it in the back. You have to sign. I said, "You stand right there." So I took her picture, and I said, "I'm going to send it to your son and tell him this is where you were born." So, but you know, I've come through this area for over 60 years, and we've come through here. The only thing that was here were the 2 security guard shacks in the front that were stone. That was it. And it's unbelievable what they've done with this place today. I mean, just incredible. And I'm so happy for it. Thank you for all your work here. After the war, you know, they went on back with their lives in LA. They couldn't go to college. And, you know, they vowed that their kids would not be gardeners or farmers. They would be doctors, lawyers, and accountants. So, yes, I became an accountant. But, so that's enough about my mom. On my mom's side of the family, her cousin was in the MIS, and he was the interpreter for MacArthur's chief of staff. And he was also instrumental in translating and writing the peace document that was signed in Missouri. And he said he was actually in Tokyo Bay. He was 1 rank away from getting on the Missouri. And so he had to watch it from afar. But but that's my mom's family. My dad's family, all of them were born in Riverside County, in Redlands and Colton. They went to Redlands High. They all graduated from Redlands High. And when the war broke out, they had the opportunity to move to Arizona because they had family in Arizona. So that's what they did. They moved. And my uncle Joe, he tried to enlist, and they turned him down because they enlisted him as enemy Navy. But my older uncle was already in the Army, and they kicked him out. But then when they formed the 100th, they let him back in. And so when the 100th went to fight in Europe, they fought like crazy, right? And one of the generals that was there said, send me more guys like this. And that's when they opened it up to the Japanese Americans to enlist. And that's when Uncle Joe enlisted. Because he thought he was going to go to the Air Force. But there really wasn't an Air Force. And then he found out that he was going to be hand-to-hand infantry. And he thought, oh my. So they sent him, he was also in Camp Shelby. And when he was there, he would tell this funny story about, you know, the restrooms, black only, white only. And they all looked at that and said, well, what do we do? So he was there, they sent him off, and his older brother was in Italy already fighting, and they sent him to France. And he fought on this hill called Hill 672. And he would talk about how, you know, they were hunkered down in those foxholes, and the German army was above them and just shooting down at them. And he told his best friend, who was next to him, don't look up, there's a sniper right there. His buddy looked up and said, where? And boom, he was shot. And so the guy died in his arms, and my uncle was so mad. He would describe it as road rage. He just got up and just started shooting. And he ended up, I think, killing like 12 soldiers and capturing another 12. And his buddies who were behind him said, where's Joe going? And because he just took off. And he would, you know, talk about his stories and how he was not the best soldier. He said he was the last one up the hill. And you know, Daryl talked about how dense it was and how foggy it was. And they would have to hold each other, their packs, to get up the hill. It was that foggy. And my uncle couldn't even shoot. He said he wasn't very good at shooting the machine gun. He would have to turn it sideways and shoot. And how he did that, the family had no idea what he did in France. And, you know, luckily we got to hear all his stories because he passed away about 7 years ago at the age of 95. And if you ever want to hear some of his stories, they're archived at the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles. And he was best friends with Senator Inoue, and because they were in the same company, they also received the medal together. Which was, I mean, we had no idea that what he did during the war. It wasn't only a couple, like a year before, one of the family members said, you know, Uncle Joe's up for the Medal of Honor. And we were like, what? We were like, huh? And, because he was a little guy. He was like 5'3". And, but he was, you know, he would tell the stories and he'd say, I don't accept this medal for me. I was no hero. He said, I accept the medal for all the guys that didn't come back. Like, no. And if you talk to these medal owners, they're so humble that the medal was, they're not a hero. The medal was never for them. It was for all the guys who did. And there were a lot of guys who did not. And he would say that he felt like they were treated like fodder, and they would go and fight where a lot of the other units just couldn't do it. And they would send the 442 in, and no matter how many people they lost, they got it done. And that was the lost battalion. They lost 2/3 of their unit to save those guys from Texas. And I mean, you know, it's a horrible story. And Uncle Joe would always say, he said, war is hell. He said, it's just awful. And, but, you know, he did it, he survived, my other uncle survived, they came back, and I asked him, I said, why did you go work for the post office? And both both of them said to me, it's the only jobs that we could get. The US government gave them those jobs where they couldn't get jobs anywhere else. So, that's kind of ironic that, and then this stamp, there's another previous stamp that's honoring the Medal of Honor recipients, but I understand it's not in circulation. But maybe they'll bring it back, I don't know, but Uncle Joe and then, Senator Noe are on that, their pictures on that stamp. So, thank you very much for letting me speak, and thank you for all being here. This is great. And come by, I'll be here.
Thank you all so much for attending. Thank you for everyone, Diane, Wayne, Daryl. I'm sure if you have questions, we'll be happy to answer them. We don't have Joe Sacato, the mailman, but we do have our local mailman stamp with a commemorative Gopher Brook stamp that's only, cancellation only available today. But it is an absolute honor to have them here and to have you here hearing those stories. So again, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much.
And there's a post office named after Uncle Joe and Deborah.